Theoharides. I said it twice in a row properly. I'm so happy. I do want to just do a couple of housekeeping items. It's hot. Lots of cold liquid refreshment over here. Need a little salt, a couple of bags of potato chips. On the other side of this cork wall are restroom facilities. So people head there. Thank you very much for coming. I do want to say something. I want to turn it right over to the secretary. I'd like you to say a welcome too, but actually, would you get up? I'd like to present the secretary with a gift, because at the end we probably won't have time. Okay. So if that's okay, we're very proud of, and we have a member of the staff who's on Central Mass. What is Central Mass Grown? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Central Mass Grown. Sherry Dean's on that. So we got you some few things from Red Apple Farm, some cider.
My kids will be really excited.
Okay, well, okay. Really my advice is in here there are some apple cider donuts. Okay. There's some fudge and some Dutch apple jam. So if you want to hide the fudge, maybe. Yeah, the fudge is for me. Yeah, the fudge is for you. Okay, very good. In a recycled bag. So we thought we'd make it.
Thank you very much.
Make it cool. So that's for you. This is your show. So Guy, you want to just say a word?
Very good. Welcome, Secretary. Theoharides. Okay, very good. Welcome to the MRPC, and we welcome everybody to the MRPC to this listening session. And you're going to be talking about
our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program.
Yes, the MVP program.
Yes.
Very good. I guess you just awarded grants in the past few weeks. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our communities within the MRPC area received them, and we are glad they did. And we welcome you and everybody else to our headquarters.
Thank you. And thank you to you both for hosting us. This is a fabulous opportunity for us to
We're
get
happy
out
to
here.
do it. It's your show, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as Glenn mentioned, we are, I am really thrilled to be here today to talk with you more about our MVP program, as well as some new legislation from Governor Baker looking to increase revenue to make it available to cities and towns to begin addressing some of these resiliency challenges. Before we get started today, I did want to do just a quick round around the table in the back of the room, just so we all have a sense of who's in the room. We've been doing these roundtables all over the state, and it's just been such a pleasure to see such a diversity of viewpoints, but also to hear a lot of the same themes over and over around challenges with aging infrastructure, challenges with the increasing frequency and severity of storms that we're seeing, challenges with vulnerable populations and heat issues, but also a lot of opportunities around the way we can address these issues, increase economic development opportunities in our downtowns, increase rural economy activity, whether it's farming or ecotourism, or just getting access to a river, like the river we just saw in Fitchburg, where residents could someday be able to fish and use the river for a variety of purposes. So excited to be here with elected officials and council members, and we'll ask the representative to say a few words as well, perhaps in a moment, but let's do a quick round, starting with you, sir. Yeah.
Peter Loa, Director of Devon's Enterprise Commission.
Good to see you again.
Claire Frieda, welcome to Leominster.
Thank you.
I'm Mr. City Council and member of the LGAC.
Ellen Holmes, Vice President of the Association of School Committees and also member of the LGAC.
Bob Schwartz from the City of Gardner. I'm also on the Planning Board in Gardner.
Great.
Guy Corbisiero, MRPC Chair.
Glenn Eaton, Executive Director, MRPC.
Sam Squalia, City Councilor in Fitchburg.
Nicholas Balsonetto, Commissioner of Public Works, City of Fitchburg.
Natalie Higgins, State Representative for the 4th Worcester District, which is the City of Leominster.
Anthony Zarella, Fitchburg City Council and Zoning Board of Appeals.
Will that be the Economic Development Director for the Town of Fitchburg?
Jim Barkley, Royalston Emergency Management.
Sean Suhasky, Town Manager in Athol.
And by the way, we have a river people can fish and swim in.
And a river.
Rebecca Bialecki, Select Board, Town of Athol.
Eric Rudman, Energy Advisory Committee, Harvard. Sean O'Donnell, Regional Planner here at Office.
And John Hume with Montachusett Regional Planning Commission.
Monica Bush, reporter from the Sentinel and Enterprise.
Hi, I'm Kara Benson. I'm the new MVP Program Manager at the state.
Kara is a resource you guys will be using a lot of. She just joined our team, and she represents, so we now have, when we started it was me, so it was pretty lonely as the climate person, and we now have Director of Resiliency, we have a manager who works on all of our global warming stuff, she also has an analyst, and then Kara's team will have 6 regional MVP coordinators around the state, helping to support this program, who will be engaging directly with municipalities. And so there will be one right for the central region here, as well as for Western Mass and as well as for the Berkshires. So we're not just doing like, you know, west of 495 is one person. We have 3 people west of 495, which is a big priority of mine, coming from the western end of the state and just feeling like that's you know, there's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of work that needs to be done. So we are really putting a lot of people on the ground.
And we are hiring for that position in this region
yes.
now. So if anyone knows of anyone who might be a good candidate, come talk to me afterwards.
Corey Oak, Town of Acton, DPW.
Brianna Jerome, Orange Innovation Center and Launch Space.
John Holly, MRPC staff.
Nancy Allen, Town of Petersham Select Board.
Henry Woolsey, Town of Petersham Select Board.
I'm Elizabeth Woods, City of Leominster, Planning and Development Director.
Jeff LeGros, the City of Gardner Conservation and Planning Agent.
Karen Chapman, MRPC Planner.
Over here,
Sean Pierce, PEA Government Affairs, work for the Secretary.
Tori Eaton, MRPC Volunteer.
Great, that looks like everyone. So thank you again for hosting. I did want to offer Rep. Higgins a chance to just talk about the region and
Secretary, thank you so much for your leadership in making sure that these conversations are happening in central and western Massachusetts, because often we feel like we're getting forgotten out here. And anytime that we can work with the administration on addressing climate change, either through mitigation or especially through mitigation, but also adaptation, these are things that are really necessary in a role that the state has to play that our municipalities can handle themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful that you're hosting this listening session and that it just so happened to be in Leominster. So
yes.
Could be a part of this conversation.
And it's the second one of these we've had in Leominster just this spring. We had a great event at the City Hall. I think it was my first week in this new role, but it's been a pleasure to come out to Leominster. And then I was out the next week for the Envirothon. So I've spent a great amount of time out in Leominster so far. Just to give you a little sense of where this program came from and where we're going with it. Back in 2016, Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito really wanted a way to begin looking at the resiliency challenges the state was facing in a comprehensive way. And so the governor signed an executive order, which for the first time really committed state government to looking at resiliency through all of our operations, all of the things we're doing, making sure that the money we are putting on the ground through capital investments, through our own operating budgets is spent in a way that is climate smart in terms of the future, so that we're planning for the changes ahead, the increasing, whether it's the increasing severity of storms or increased heat that affects things, the increasing things like Lyme disease that are changing as the climate changes, and then challenges with agriculture and different crops, different weeds, different invasive pests, challenges to forestry, those kinds of things. So the executive order called for state government to do vulnerability assessments, to look at those challenges we might have and begin identifying critical next actions. We put together a plan working hand in hand with MEMA through their state hazard mitigation planning process, and that was due last fall, and we have completed that. But one of the key pieces, and I think something that's been just so important to the Baker-Polito administration generally, is this idea of partnership between state and local government to address a multitude of challenges, but in this case to address climate change and resiliency. And so that commitment was in the executive order. It became the MVP program, and then the MVP MVP program got codified into law in the environmental bond bill last session, which we were really grateful to have the legislature's support on. What we have done through MVP is in the last 3 years, the program requires communities to go through a planning process, to look comprehensively, bring all of their departments together, bring key stakeholders together, work with a consultant who we train and we sort of pre-procure so that municipalities don't have to go through that procurement process. But the planning process is really about your community. You can do it regionally, which we think is great, but what we wanted was not a consultant to come in and give you a very technical analysis and leave. We wanted a consultant to come in and get all of the knowledge your staff already have and that your residents already have about the challenges you're facing, the opportunities you see, and then some of the strengths your community has that you can build on to address some of these challenges. And so planning grants are small, as many of you know who have them. They're around somewhere in the order of $20,000 to $30,000 because it really is, it's a simple process. It's a workshop with data. It's really about stakeholdering and sort of building the framework to do more of this work. Once you get through that planning process, what we've said is, all right, come up with your list of priorities. Then we want to put real money out to you and make sure you can get those priorities done. And so that's when, in just the last year and a half, we've been able to start deploying real on-the-ground money for action grants. Action grants address those priorities. They can be up to $2 million per town. We encourage you to work regionally. A lot of these challenges we're seeing don't stop in one town. They cross borders, particularly if it's water. And so a lot of these challenges with infrastructure, whether it's a culvert or a bridge or a larger water sewer system or what have you, a lot of it crosses borders. But our action grants are really seeking to take a priority identified through that planning process and help you do every stage of it, from feasibility and further vulnerability studies and planning up through design and permitting and then to the actual project. And so we're looking for you to stage projects so you can move through that process smoothly, but we will cover every phase of project development, which we've heard is just really, really essential to get these projects out the door. We have a big focus on nature-based solutions, so trying to use the natural landscape or to mimic natural landscape features, whether it's on a smaller scale like a rain garden in an urban center, or actually going out and preserving a wetland, restoring a wetland so that it can absorb some of that stormwater, planting urban trees to reduce the urban heat island effect and attenuate some of the floodwaters we see in downtowns. Or just protecting forest land in your community so that the forest you have is more intact and can provide a lot of those benefits that are so critical as the climate changes. But we also certainly permit, we certainly allow in the grant program actual infrastructure. Our focus there is making sure that new infrastructure and infrastructure retrofits are designed to new conditions that we're seeing. So, whether it's new precipitation patterns or even looking at things like, does the mix of concrete or asphalt need to be changed and adjusted for the heat patterns we're going to see in the future. So those are what the grant programs do. I will say 71% of the Commonwealth is now involved in planning. So this is huge for us. In just 3 years, 71% has signed up. And then this year, in our second year of action grants, with only about 60 communities eligible to apply, we saw $26 million of need and $10 million we could fund. And that $10 million, we started the program with $500,000 in 2016, and Governor Baker has expanded it. We released $12 million total this year. So we've increased the program rapidly, but the need is really ramping up. And so the last piece I wanted to talk about before I open this up to discussion is the governor's new proposal, Senate Bill 10, which is, we are calling it the Resilient Massachusetts legislation, but it is an act to promote resiliency in the Commonwealth. All it does, it's actually a very simple piece of legislation, it increases a real estate transfer fee that is paid by the seller at the point of sale to create a sustainable and dedicated funding stream in a trust fund for resiliency for cities and towns. And just to get the less nice part out of the way, which is what the fee does in terms of the impact on a homeowner. If you sell a $400,000 house, the increase is $900. So it's a very modest increase. The rate actually hasn't been adjusted in about 30 years. So it's a low price to begin with. We're sort of bottom of the pack in terms of other New England states. But I think, you know, the reason we looked at this source and the reason we felt like we really needed to get a new source of revenue was this is something new. This is not something we budgeted for in the past, and the governor has always been very clear when there's a new challenge, we will look to new sources of revenue, and so that's what we're doing in this case. The reason we're taking it from the housing sector is because these investments are really about protecting property, whether it's commercial property, residential property, the value just in your land. A lot of these impacts are going to be borne at the local level by property owners. And so this investments that we're creating through this fund is intended to go right back into communities through grants, through loans, to communities, also to private entities within communities who hold critical infrastructure, whether it's your critical care facility, dam owner, that's a private entity and not a municipality. There are lots of these privately held pieces of infrastructure that can't be funded through the normal bonding process and grants. This fund would give us a lot more flexibility. It would also allow us to do something that we haven't been able to do that we've heard from communities is important, which is instead of, you know, you come in, you apply for a grant, at the end of the fiscal year you have to be done, you don't know if you're going to get another grant. You have to hope that we're going to, you know, fund the next stage of the project. With a trust fund, we can actually give funding over multiple years. So we could say, you know, for the next 5 years, here's your money, go work on this project. It's not going to have that hard deadline at the end of a fiscal year. You're not going to have to, you know, reapply. We'll actually just give you this chunk of money now. Go do this project. We might give some of it to you after you finish the project because that's what we like to do. But you know, it's not going to have those end of the fiscal year. We don't know if we're going to have this funding again kind of issue, and so we hear that's just so critical to communities. I know our folks working directly on the grant have seen that. So that is likely to be taken up. We've done a hearing on it in June. The governor and I testified, and I think it is likely to be taken up after the August recess again. But we know that hearing directly from communities on this will be so important as the legislature debates this going forward. So you know, look to your help on that, and look for it. You know, I think what we're looking for is to put a lot of it into MVP, but also put a lot of it into some of our other programs like our culvert program, which we've heard is just so important to municipalities, and then also into direct grants and loans as these issues come up. And again, it would be sort of every stage of the process. So I wanted to open up the room. I know many of you are involved in various stages of MVP, so we're always looking for feedback. What can we do better? What's the next step? Where have you seen real opportunities? For those of you who haven't applied to the program yet, do you have questions that we can answer while we're here? Do you have thoughts on some of the challenges you're seeing in your communities? You know, really, we've been collecting most of the information to design the program based on these kinds of conversations, and so we really are interested in honest feedback. I don't know if you want to mention, you guys held a workshop last fall, but how easy it was, you know, was it easy for your communities to apply to the program last year? Were there stumbling blocks?
I'm going to get some help from the staff. I know John Hume, our Planning Development Director, and Karen Chapman, there she is, we're both some of the pre-trained consultants, so we have a couple on staff. So I know they're close to the program. John, you want to add?
I would say that it's a relatively straightforward application. The communities didn't have so much issues trying to complete the application and forward it to the state. A few communities did ask for some assistance from me and Karen Chapman, another MRPC staff member, but it was relatively minimal, and we were happy to see a lot of communities in north central Massachusetts applying this year, because we had that gap last year where municipalities in this region hadn't applied before.
Yeah.
So I think the workshop in the fall that we had out here was terrific, and we gained a lot of interest in the program, and the municipalities realized the benefits of participating.
And you guys, does MRPC have trained, are you guys trained to provide services?
John and Karen.
Yeah, me and Karen are.
Yes.
So that's another thing I should mention is that our regional planning associations across the state have been helping with all of this, and most of them are trained in the program and can actually be a service provider or can just help you apply for the grants. But you guys have been critical partners across the state in implementing the program. And so for any community that's looking for help, well, you know, first come to us and we can help, but your RPA is just a phenomenal resource in this too. Yes?
A question about legislation and reaction to it. It appears that the funding stream goes to the Global Warming Trust Fund in general.
Yes.
It commits the increase to that. And then it says that 33% of the revenues collected shall be transferred. So does that mean that if other increases are made, 33% is locked in so that it will increase even if other increases are made to this excess?
That I don't know. We can. I think it's the amount that is actually this. Okay. So stay at that. What we've estimated it to be is around 137 million a year, which would go up to 10 billion. To $1 billion at the end of 10 years.
And not all of that is for the Green Communities program.
No, all of this is for resiliency.
I didn't.
Yeah. So Green Communities is a different funding stream. This Global Warming Solutions Trust Fund is broad enough that we can put other things into it. Like we can put money for mitigation into it. Right now there's nothing else. But this money is would very explicitly be set aside just for this, just for resiliency.
And then a follow-up. If you've gotten pushback or I wonder, have you gotten pushback from, let's say, the real estate community, and is that an opportunity to engage then and teach about why real estate really is going to suffer if it's not protected? So I'm curious about how you're doing that or whether you...
Yeah, so the only pushback we've gotten on this has been really from the real estate community. You know, I think anytime something looks like it might affect home sales, which we don't think this will, because it really is a very small cost. You know, they have not been they have not endorsed this legislation, and I don't think are very supportive of the approach. I think we are trying to do that education piece. I have a meeting tomorrow, actually with one of the associations, and I think there is that education piece of, you know, already in Boston. There was a study just this spring showing that property values are already declining just based on the perceived risk from sea level rise. And that's not just a coastal issue. That is an issue across the state. This is a program for across the state. You know, it's not, the governor really has been clear on this. I don't just want to do coastal projects. This is an issue that affects every corner of the Commonwealth. And the thing that's going to hit first is your property values. Because as you're not able to get insurance, as the mortgage companies are saying, I don't know that I want to give this property a mortgage, and then, you know, as sellers are looking at property and saying, am I willing to take on the risk knowing this property is in a floodplain, knowing it's not in a floodplain but it keeps getting flooded as our floodplains are expanding. I think this really is going to start hitting those property values. And so what we've seen, even from on the state bonding side of things from the credit rating agencies, is they are starting to look at our state credit score based on what we're doing on climate change. That's starting to be part of the mental equation that they're going through. And they actually said when the city of Boston got its rating think it was the spring of 2018, they scored higher because they had a plan for climate change. And that's, I think it's just the beginning of what's going to be a much longer process. It's going to get much more sophisticated as it goes on, but we are starting to see money come into play. So, but I think there's a need for us to do some educating to the realtors, but I think also hearing from municipalities that this is so important, even to realtors who just work in your communities is a place to make a difference.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Yes.
I sit in the position of being a realtor on this side, and government on the other side.
Yeah,
so,
great.
I think there is going to be a lot of pushback. I'm getting information now from Mass Association. I'm part of the Northwest County.
Yeah.
Has there been any attempt to sit and have discussions about this? Because I think it's really going to be done.
Yeah.
Because there's an automatic, don't go after real estate every time there's going to be an increase in something. Try for education, I think it's really imperative that those conversations continue just the way you just described it.
Yeah.
Because everybody does think it's going to affect the sale price. I personally don't as much, but I think there's a lot of feeling out there that it will affect the market.
Yeah.
So I think that's really got to be driven home. I think you're on point.
Do you think there's anyone who can particularly convey that message well? I mean, we will try, but is there someone who could, from the community almost, who could convey that message?
I could give you some people to have a discussion.
Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce gave a presentation with the real estate on this proposal a few months ago.
I had conversations yesterday. We had a realtor function, and this was brought up.
Yeah.
And there are people in our organization, Northwest County, that are on the state level. So they're the ones that are kind of concerned about it. And of course, they bring it up to me, and I get into this two-way discussion.
Yeah.
But that's why I think there'd really be a good opportunity. I'd be happy to get those people.
Okay, that would be
together for a conversation.
Yeah, that would be terrific. I do think we need to sort of broaden out the conversations we've been having. I think that's great. And maybe Sean, you guys can connect after this. Yeah.
Hi, I don't know if this has happened yet, but I imagine that on a constituent level, you'll receive pushback from people who are selling apartment buildings in Worcester, who might say, why am I being charged to fix Cape homes and rising sea levels, whether or not that's accurate? What is your response to people who might have that point of view?
Yeah, well, I think climate change the impacts are going to be across the state. The investments we're looking to make are going to be across the state. We are looking at different ways of allocating the funding to make sure it's equitably distributed across the state. We want to look at need, but we also want to look at, if revenue is generated from a certain area, should a portion of it be returned to that area? And so it wouldn't be that Western Massachusetts is subsidizing, issues in Eastern Massachusetts. It would be that there's this fund. We look at some type of way of distributing the funding equitably across regions, and we also look at the need. And so I think there will be challenges in terms of balancing. A large proportion of the revenue will come from Eastern Massachusetts, and so the question is, should it stay there, or should we sort of look holistically at the state in terms of addressing the need? We haven't created that formula yet, but we'll be very open to feedback on how to do that, both from the legislature, but directly from municipalities as well. But I think this is very clearly not just about homes on the coast. In fact, it's really not about individual homes. It's really about putting infrastructure in communities, infrastructure that includes natural resources to protect the whole community. And it's about doing that across the Commonwealth, not just for sea level rise, but for inland flooding, for heat, for vulnerable populations. Yeah. Oh, we have two here. Yeah, sorry.
Yesterday's announcement over is
He's great. Yes, thank you. I think that the Millbury project is a great example of where we are doing all of this work in the downtown of Millbury to make sure we're getting stormwater into the ground, doing rain gardens, also doing work to make sure there's accessibility. But not only is it, it's reducing the urban heat island effect, it's reducing stormwater, it's reducing pollutants into the Blackstone, but then it's also creating this space where there can be a lot of economic development in Millbury. And so we are really also looking at sort of these two-pronged projects where we're able to increase resilience, but also foster economic development and really open up new opportunities for what a community might want to see in the next 20 to 30 years as they think about where they want to go. Yeah.
So I wanted to offer a thank you, and then I'll have a question for you.
Yeah.
So thank you for recognizing that climate issues are affecting us. It affects our rivers, our streams, the temperatures that we witness. It affects quality of life, and it's good to see the administration taking a focus on that. Thank you, Glenn, when you hosted the program last fall, and the staff. I don't see her today, but it was a great program, and it helped in the hand-holding as well, the assistance that MRPC gave to our planning department, so that we were able to receive an action grant in Athol, and we're working, we're just starting up on that now. My question is, the governor, and even your appearance here today, there's been a lot of focus on this bill and this method of funding for climate change, and there needs to be funding attached to it, so thank you for advocating a plan. I know the speaker has advocated borrowing. Well, still, the money's coming from somebody's pocket, right? Even if you're borrowing. So I guess my question is, where do you see the landscape on Beacon Hill, and do you think we'll get funding attached to this worthy endeavor?
So I think first and foremost, I think it's amazing that we're having a conversation about multiple bills for resiliency. Just 2 or 3 years ago, and certainly for the 15, 20 years I've been working on this issue, I've never seen anything like this. So just the groundswell of support for climate resiliency has just been amazing to see. I do think there's a real chance of getting funding for this. I think it's a really, the thing that makes climate resiliency approachable, I think, is that it's concrete, hopefully not too many concrete, but it's real projects on the ground in communities, because that's where climate change impacts hit, is local. And so that tangibility of this issue, I think, makes it a lot easier to pass legislation around. And so, whether it's the Greenworks bill, the governor's proposal, some combination, I'm not sure what will happen, but I am optimistic that we will get some source of funding for this. I would say, the reason we've looked to new revenue is because we can get it right out the door, and so we really feel like there is a need for new revenue here for this challenge. So we are pursuing that, but I do think the legislature has been hearing overwhelmingly from their communities that there is a need for funding for this issue. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm a commissioner of public works. From a DPW perspective, first of all, I actually took part in the city of Keene, New Hampshire's 2007 E-Clay. It was the first climate resiliency plan in the United States that we did there, and I think that the issues are still the same 12 years later. You get more heat, you get more moisture into the atmosphere, and what that means for public works is bigger rain events, 100-year storms. We're seeing 100-year storms every other year. We're seeing 500-year storms. And also in the winter, more moisture, but the weather is also a little bit warmer, so we're getting more snow and a lot more icing events. I know some of this a lot of this funding is for capital improvements. The thing with culverts, we can change a culvert pretty easily, a backhoe, plastic pipe. What's happening though is the environmental permitting is actually more costly and time consuming than actually being able to replace a culvert. I know that the state, as part of the fiscal 19 capital budget, put together the culvert and small bridge working group, which is seeking to minimize the environmental permitting to put on to be able to put in bigger culverts and make the process of culvert replacement easier. I think that'd be great if that happens.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot. Just yeah.
The other thing with Public Works is we're under a consent decree to separate our stormwater and our sewer. But what has been happening is that all goes to the sewer ratepayer. So what they're concentrating on is separating the sewer and the stormwater system that's left over. It's only for 2 to 5 year storms.
Mm-hmm.
So we're spending all this money, but our stormwater systems, you know, basically can't handle more storms. And they feel like they can't spend money on upgrading the storm system at the same time, because then the sewer payer is paying for it. So there could be some kind of money for that. The other part, Public Works, is water resource management. City of Fitchburg, we have a great resource in water. We have 7 pristine reservoirs. We're only at 20%. We could be selling water to everybody.
That's amazing.
But the thing is, like yesterday, DEP almost made us put in a water restriction to the city because the Nashua River level is low. Even though our reservoirs are full, we have plenty of water. So it's a weird, and we have a heat wave. So we were almost at the point where DEP was going to force us to tell people not to use water outside, even though we have plenty of water. So that's a sort of a weird. I don't know if somebody can look into that.
We can definitely look into that.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, we have a heat source, and we're going to tell people you can't turn on your sprinkler, even though we have a ton of water. And then also the snow and ice events, that's Chapter 90 money. I know Chapter 90 has been a big issue, but again, we're having to spend more money on ice removal, you know, snow, things of that nature. So again, if there's, you know, I understand capital funding is important, but operating funding is where the cities really struggle sometimes, especially gateway cities like Fitchburg.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really good challenge too with winter events. It's just the messiness of winter events. Yeah, and I'll call it that because you never know what it's going to be. But you know, I think even that winter of 2015, and you can't blame any one event necessarily on climate change, but just the heavy snowfalls that we're seeing, even with the warming temperatures, just that more moisture in the air. We just are seeing a lot more weather in the winter, and a lot more of those icing, events, which definitely. And
it's counterintuitive to some people to see, but if it's really cold, we're okay. It's when it's 32 and we get precipitation, we have snow, then rain on top of it, or rain, and then that's what makes it really messy.
Yeah. Okay.
And those icing events are causing so much groundwater, they're damaging our roads in a fairly significant, fashion, especially this past winter in the city of Fitchburg. There have been so many roads that have quickly degraded due to the icing of the high groundwater table.
Yeah, no, we're seeing that in a lot of places for sure. Yes.
Just to dovetail on what the gentleman's concerns are, is there any plan for DEP to update their regulations, like for stream crossing standards or wetlands buffers, increasing it, knowing that we're going to have more 500 and 1,000 year?
So one of the things that we identified in the state plan we did last year was that we need a full look at policies and regulations like wetlands, like stream crossings, where they have data underlying them that needs to be updated as those conditions change. And so we're working on precipitation data for the wetlands process right now, and I think that will affect a lot of the other programs there. But we are planning to do a pretty holistic review of policies and regulations that are affected by climate change. It won't happen. What I would say though is it won't happen overnight. It will take us some time. We have to go through the whole stakeholder process and making sure we have the right data. And in many cases, what we're seeing is that while we have some of the raw data on how climate change is going to change rainfall, for example, we don't necessarily have the management corollaries of that, whether it's the design storm or what have you. And so some of that we still have to get. We've hired, or in the process of hiring, a consulting team right now who's looking at design standards and how they need to be updated across state governments to take into account these new projections.
And weren't there, if I'm wrong, tell me, but
Yeah.
I thought we participated in a climate resiliency and chemical safety program. We had a grant for it. I thought that they had some kind of research or a program that they were using to project what was going to be happening in the future.
Yeah, so the state's, our program, the MVP program, went and worked with UMass Amherst to get climate projections for the state. They're downscaled to the watershed level. The Office of Technology Assistance has mapping work they've done with that, and then looking at where some of these toxic users are and then where other vulnerabilities are. So they put out some maps there. But there is a lot of the underlying data. We just haven't connected it all with the environmental regulations and permitting yet.
So there is cross-departmental talking.
Yes.
So that I'm not doing something different from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. There is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Questions or thoughts? Yes.
So I'd just like to put in an ask.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. Yeah.
So my ask would be that the projects are distributed equitably across rural communities.
Yep.
You know, these tiny little towns, especially from north central Mass, North Quabbin area of the world and other rural parts of the state, sometimes we're doing things on a much smaller scale. But when you look at things like we have many more miles of roads sometimes,
yes,
with a much less per capita.
Yes.
So the typical formulas sometimes don't play out to support anything rural.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see this, you know, be something that can move in that direction. And if there's any cross-departmental projects that could get bonus points. So we have a couple of very small housing authority projects in our community that are really out of date, but they're at the bottom of a long list of projects across the state that need improvements. We've had some investment, but you know, AC is something that's now necessary, where maybe 20 years ago it wasn't.
Yeah.
We need to make those kind of improvements to help some of our more vulnerable populations be able to live better.
And we have money in the program, particularly if you were going to put in an air source heat pump for AC. That's the kind of thing we could actually do with action grants in a not in a private facility, but in housing. But and I'm not actually sure. The grant itself might not. We are looking for projects that have been identified through a process across departments, where everyone was in the same room coming up with that list of priorities and trying to look for things that address multiple issues. But that's a really important point, and there might be a way for us to think about how to make that even clearer in the next round of action grants, because this is something where, you know, we want town departments to be looking at this issue holistically across the whole town and not just thinking in stovepipes. We've been trying to do that at the state scale. It's challenging, but I think it's really important on this issue. On the rural piece, that has been such a key development piece of this program, is that when we started it, you know, the city of Cambridge had done a $500,000 vulnerability assessment. Boston was working on like $1 million project. I think Newton had one out there. And this was money just for planning. And we said, you know, if everyone thinks they have to do a $500,000 plan just to address this problem, we're never going to get anywhere. We think you can do this kind of plan. $20,000. We think that's all you need to just get a sense of what the issues are. You've done so much planning work. I love planning. I could plan forever, but our real interest was, how do we actually get this money starting to help communities? And so our challenge, and this, you know, I think was right from the governor, is how do we make this accessible to everyone in the state, so that you don't feel like you have to be a Cambridge or a Somerville or a Newton to do this. You can access this program even if you have a half-time staff person on Wednesdays, which is the case in the town my mom lives in. There's someone in the town hall half a day on Wednesdays, and so it's one of the reasons we're getting the regional coordinators out there on the ground to help with the proposals. But it's one of the reasons we'll give you extra funding if you don't have staff time to manage this. You know, we ask a number of questions in the grant. There may be more questions we should ask, but you know, if you have trouble with match, if if you have trouble with a staffing match, if you don't have someone to manage the project, how can we get you those resources and think creatively? You know, some of it is, a lot of these small towns have great volunteers who sit on commissions, but some of them don't. And so how do we sort of give you that capacity to even apply for the grant and then to get the money on the ground? So we hear this concern in a lot of the places we've gone to, and we want to keep working to make that easier.
We somehow need to elevate that so people see what she's talking about.
Yeah.
We have a river that runs between us. We also have a railroad that crosses back and forth across the river. If we screw up and spill something in the Millers River, it's going all the way to the ocean.
Right.
But we screwed up people from here to breakfast. So, so it is not population based.
No.
It is not population based. It is state based. So, you know, we may need a very large project, and people are going to say, why does Athol and Royalston need to do that? It's because we got miles of river between us and the ocean that we're protecting up here. And it starts, you know, just above us.
I wish I had the list in front of me of projects, but I think, you know, the action grants this year, there was a big one to Boston, but I don't necessarily think the money flowed out the door based on, you know, the formula for funding projects is not based on population for the action grants. So there is a population piece for the planning grants, just because there's more people that have to come into a room, so we do allocate a little bit more money at some point for just thinking about the capacity of the planning workshop itself. But for the action grants, there's no more money, you know, based on population. It's really based on a project that they're trying to address.
I believe this region, Montachusett region, we have 22 cities and towns plus Devon, so 23 local jurisdictions. Didn't this region receive 8 or 9 MVP awards?
Yes.
Something like that. So, and they weren't all the cities, obviously, Pittsburgh, you saw that today, but many were rural communities. But you know, to echo that point, I won't name any piece of legislation or that didn't become law or some that did. But we are, and I didn't know you were from Western Mass.
I am.
We're kindred spirits. So the reality is that you know what I'm going to say before I say it about the Central and Western Mass feeling about, oh, that's another program in Boston for the Easterners. And what I'm hearing you say is that this isn't. This is really for statewide. I don't envy you trying to sell something named climate change preparedness. I call it flooding. We have terrible times with flooding in the region, statewide, nationwide. And to me, it's about flooding and the impact on infrastructure. And I would close my comment by saying, I think we're trying to help one town right now replace a culvert. It's $500,000. That's the construction. That doesn't cost. That's not the design money, correct, Karen and John, for the Orange Project?
No, the culverts are ridiculously expensive.
Unbelievable.
Ridiculously expensive.
Yes, ma'am.
And then even just getting a sense of, I don't know how many of you have mapped your culverts or assessed some culverts, but just even doing sort of the baseline of which culverts go first, and what do we need to do with the whole entire underground system.
That's a whole other issue.
It's a whole other issue.
Related to MS4 and so on, and we've tried to do it, but it's bodies on the ground, and tablets taking data, and time is money.
One of the things that I think it was Shelburne or Buckland, I can't remember which, but one of those communities was able to get students on the ground for a summer doing all the GPS coordinates for their culverts and then getting the condition. But I've been thinking we should have some kind of program where we can deploy students out to municipalities to get that, I mean, just to get a baseline of what.
That's what we need. That's really, and a program would help, and we've done that before. I love hiring students in the summer, well, throughout the year. Bluntly, I got to make payroll every 2 weeks. And you know what? The student interns who are master's or PhD level young men and women doing these programs, they're cheaper. It's an economic issue.
We unfortunately, I don't think we can pay our state interns, so they're great.
Well, they get the benefit for working for the Commonwealth.
I just want to mention that Winchendon actually got the students from the Winchendon School as part of their service learning program to work on this project. Now, it never got off the ground, but they were very glad to have part of it and for the students to learn, and so it was a good partnership.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, I think there's a lot you can do with students. Sometimes at the town level, though, there's no infrastructure for you to take on a student and manage that person and make sure they have the resources and all of that. So that might be another place that the state could step in with some funding or support. Yeah.
With this program, if you get the funding lined up, I hear talk about the MS4 permitting. Can stormwater, I mean, it seems like stormwater projects would fit as part of this.
And that's one of the things, I think we're also thinking about combined sewer over, you know, the whole picture writ large is how do we address, really take on some of those challenges that MS4 is bringing up for communities and address it through this program. So,
So one of the things you said and the governor said, I've heard him say, is, which I think is great, because I don't hear it at the state level, is, I'm not sure the wording you used, but we're just designing for the future, designing for the change, and not just rebuilding what worked for a while but doesn't work anymore, you know, increasing the capacity and doing it right.
Yeah.
Is that?
No, that's exactly right. And so that's you know, I think why we've been saying, you know, while we have a focus on nature-based solutions, that's not the only thing we're going to need here. We really are going to need real, you know, some real infrastructure projects. But if we're going to do those projects, we need to make sure we're designing them to the new conditions, not to the conditions currently. And I think it's, you know, it's certainly very true on the coast, thinking about rebuilding things like seawalls and the infrastructure there. We don't want to make investments that we keep making over and over and it keeps failing. But it's the same thing with inland waterways. You know, we replace things and then they get taken out in the next severe event. So if we're going to make an investment, we want to make sure we're doing it differently so that it lasts longer and so that it's a responsible use of taxpayer dollars. I think particularly when we're thinking about this new revenue source and increasing a fee, we really want to show that the money we're spending is actually saving money. And I think, you know, one of the numbers that's out there from FEMA is that if you invest in this stuff beforehand, it's $1. If you invest in the recovery, it's $6. And so, you know, it's a compelling argument to really take some money, it's not a huge amount of money, through this legislation, start making those proactive investments and then saving a ton of money on the back end, both from the state, federal, and local government side, but also from the private property owner who's not bearing some of those damages. Yeah.
So $1 now, $6. That is also kind of in concert with something else, which is that we've all heard the phrase, a tree isn't valued until it's cut down. Development pressures, we applied for a grant to look at agricultural resources in our town and operations, and the pressures on farms and agricultural operations are such that they have market pressures that have reduced their income, but at the same time the development pressures have raised the value of their lands on paper, and so they're assessed at higher rates.
Yeah.
And how many times have you driven by a new development and it's called Orchard Hill or something, and then there are these Palladian windowed houses, new wall. This puts additional pressure on the ecosystems around. So how do we address and value the ecosystem services provided by either agriculture or, you mentioned, forest lands, so that people recognize that value and want to keep it that way? It takes money. And also there's an additional piece of keeping these operations in business. They're not making a lot of money, but the townships need to take, you know, responsibility for that. I don't see that in the same way. So if there was some way to value them, or some additional value rather than just the real estate or development value, that was publicizable.
Well, we do have, you know, we do have a couple of programs that reduce the taxes you pay on your land if you put them into some type of covenant, you know, saying that it's for agriculture or it's for forestry for a certain amount of time, and that reduces the burden significantly. 61A, 61B is a suite of programs. There's also agricultural preservation restrictions, but I do hear your point. We don't, you know, I don't think there's any state in the country right now that actually pays for the ecosystem services that are derived on the landscape, and it's a tricky issue. There's all these, there's all these services that we don't pay for, whether it's the biodiversity that's produced on the land, the shade from a tree, the carbon sequestration. Water filtration. Water purification. There are markets here and there around phosphorus, carbon. It's not something that's gotten a whole lot of pickup, but I think, there are those programs that do pay for the use of land, keeping it in that use, that have been, the APR, for example, has been very, very successful in the state. But I do think one of my interests, that not related to this, but as a, related to this too, but one of my priorities as secretary, I think, is really looking at how do we keep rural economies able to do forestry, able to do agriculture in a sustainable way going forward, and looking at not just doing what they're currently doing, but also diversification of some of the activities they're doing on farm or on forest, so that they're taking, so they have other opportunities outside of sort of their traditional season, if you will, of doing things to increase the value.
I think there is legislation to look at the assessment if your buildings are for agricultural purposes, to not value them
as high. I don't know. I haven't seen that one. We can look into that.
Yeah. I'll put it up.
Okay. Can you speak a little to the project you're doing? Just because it's one of our it's the first farming one we have through MVP. Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. So the economic credit, what we heard from our orchardists and agriculturists was that climate is a pressure, but it's not the major thing that's impacting their day-to-day right now. They are used to handling climate, the variability of whether they're under additional stresses. But it really was this economic piece and pressure for them that their markets are getting more competitive because of foreign products and the globalization. Yet their revenues are additionally spoken for by taxes and also regulation. There are regulatory pressures. Farm ponds are not able to be used for irrigation of crops because there is a USDA ruling that says you can't. It has to be proven to be safe or something, and small farms can't do that. Even though farm ponds are great buffers for livestock and what. So what we have really decided is what we need to do is take the effort into the community and say support, eat local or whatever. That's one way to allow people to see the value of what they have surrounded by these farms, but they may go out to shop and save or whatever, and we need to redirect that. So that's a local issue, I think, that we can work on. But I think, and one of the other pieces of assessment was on our forest lands, which we have a lot of housing fingered into farm and forest land, and they're really benefiting from it. But then you see another parcel go, and that just puts so much more strain on the town in terms of water, services, emergency services, all that. So we don't have a way of addressing that except just to try to look at what the value of these lands are and look to grants and regional preservation efforts. It's just a big problem. We're not alone. So I think the agricultural community in general was, yeah, we know about climate, but it's a piece of what's happening to us right now.
Well, and I'd say those other things I identify, they're not climate necessarily, but they're resiliency, right? They're a piece of the overall, and so those are things we want to look at too, because if your sector is already having challenges, climate change is sort of a multiplier on top of those challenges, and so I think everyone should think about this very holistically in terms of what's eligible for this program. We really are looking at the whole picture, and then climate change on top of it. But
many refugee flows around the world are because of failures, and so it's an interesting, very holistic, if you want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to sort of connect up the UMass agriculture program
with Stockbridge with Harvard so that they could actually...
You guys brought in UMass.
We did bring in a professor of plant pathology, and a lot of his expertise was good, but it was very general, and what we were hoping for was a more on-the-ground approach to what could be done locally. But I mean, he had wonderful resources, but they'd already been sort of developed at a general level. There's integrated risk management consultant that does bring that down to the farm level. So I think some combination of those two would probably work well into the future, and I guess we'll look for a recommendation on that basis.
Yes.
One of the challenges I see from a planning perspective and regulatory perspective with wetlands protection is getting developers and contractors to actually implement nature-based solutions. You know, I can tell them that, you know, they're cost-effective to put in and that their maintenance costs are the same or less than traditional infrastructure, but I still don't seem to get the support or the acceptance, I guess would be the better word, from them. So if it takes 10 more years from now to, you know, to get them on board, you know, where the legislation and the funding source is now here, and obviously by the amount of municipalities getting involved in the program in a short amount of time, it's generally or widely accepted. If we have to wait 10 years from now to get the engineers and contractors on board with implementing some of these things, there's going to be a gap. Any thoughts on how this program might help implement that, or how we can do a better job of convincing?
Yeah, well, a couple things on that, and I'm sure others have thoughts, having worked on the ground on this stuff. I saw this issue as a conservation commissioner in Grafton. When we lived out there, we had a bylaw in Grafton saying that when a development proposal came before the Concom, it had to have a green infrastructure alternative as well as the conventional proposal. And so I would say about 50% of our engineers actually came in with that, with that green infrastructure alternative, because they didn't, at the time, they didn't have the expertise to do it, and we didn't probably enforce the bylaw as well as we should have. But it was hard because you have this pressure from the developers and the project proponents trying to get it done. When they did come in with an alternative, they often had real concerns about the maintenance and the materials they were using, and so there's just some lack of information about what was possible. I do think that's changing, but we are really trying to, there's a couple of things we're trying to do. One of them is just to collect and track metrics on the projects that are going in that use these new strategies, so that we know what those construction costs are, we know what the maintenance costs are. The maintenance costs in particular, you have to buy vacuums for some of these pervious surfaces and special new equipment to take care of them. And so we are trying to look at that return on investment, what's needed up front, what you have to do over the life cycle, what's different than a normal project might be, but then how much longer does this thing actually last than a more traditional project. I think the Mass Audubon has a group, a branch of it that's trying to work on collecting bylaws and things that have been done at the local level to increase low-impact development techniques and things like that. So they have a lot of tools. I'm forgetting the name of the program they have. Anyway.
Shaping the future.
Shaping our community, shaping our data, something. But that's good just because it puts models out there. Because a lot of this is the local level. If you want to see developers coming in with this, you kind of need a bylaw that says you have to consider these types of projects. Obviously, we're trying to incentivize it through grants before we do anything, in terms of changing regulation or permitting, because we just feel like, incentivizing this first is the right way to go. I think the other piece, what was the other piece that I wanted to mention? Oh, is that the legislation, another way we're thinking of it is, could we use some of the money to cover the incremental cost of doing the better technique? And so if, there's resistance to the idea of this upfront, more expensive, could this money be used to cover that gap, which is really the resiliency gap, right? It's bringing a project from just the baseline to that next level. And so that's another thing.
But it actually costs less.
Sometimes it does, yeah. Yeah.
So at Devon's, we did a case study, and then we sat down with, a year after it was built, we sat down with the designer, the tenant who uses, just like this was the Montachusett Community College parking lot. And we used low impact development, basically swales, bioswales for it. And the facility manager, the tenants, the design engineer, we sat down and we did a return on investment case study, saved them $124,000 on a parking lot to do it using green infrastructure. And then they did their phase 2, applying the lessons they learned from phase 1, and their phase 3, all using the low impact approach. And after that, we require a waiver if you aren't going to use green infrastructure. So you're required to use green infrastructure now. Low impact development.
It is cheaper. I worked with a developer in the town of Rutland when I was supporting the planning board, and we had the alternatives. He was appreciative to not plant, not to have to trench and plant a pipe when he could use the low impact development.
It's all country drainage.
It's country drainage.
Yeah.
Exactly, and he saved tens and tens and tens of thousands as well.
Well, I think the message coming from the towns who did it, it would actually be a really effective way to share some of this, because me telling people this is much less effective.
So I'll invite you to bring your developer down, and we'll have him talk to the facility manager.
It's great, and I think that might be the key.
Yeah.
It's letting them just see it and digest it and say, oh, okay, that's
it's got to be on the ground. I mean, we've been looking I feel like for years for these case studies that we can just bring people to, and there's like a couple of them in the Boston area, but these little ones are all over the place now.
And what we did with our engineering department was we took them on a field trip up to the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Management Center, where they had the low impact development and pervious pavement there for 30 years now. And, sand has filled up the gaps in the pervious pavement. Well, guess what? Sand is pervious. You don't really need to vacuum that out all the time, and it works. So,
can you lead more field trips? Like if we send you municipalities?
We're happy to show them what we've done and sit down with the developer and the design engineers.
Do a good role for RPAs too. We're gonna make you field trip leaders.
That's fine. We're happy to do that. We've done that before, and there's a great YouTube video of a concrete truck at UNH pouring water through pervious pavement. Once I saw it, it's like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Why isn't anybody doing it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, we have a U.S. Fish and Wildlife parking lot. The cartway is asphalt, and then the parking area is pervious pavement. We take a bottle of water, we pour it onto the asphalt, the water goes across it, it hits the pervious pavement, and disappears.
Wow.
Just all you gotta do is look at it.
You got some great examples right out your door here.
Yes, this place is
the trustees' facility, it's a model.
The other thing I just thought of when you say that is that even in small sections and problem sections where we're having these types of winters that are freeze-thaw conditions, usually the ice conditions are in small sections of roadway that are consistent each time, because of the lay of the land and everything. A section of pervious pavement there that doesn't ever really allow it to freeze up. It doesn't require you to do the whole roadway just in those problems.
Right.
Quick question with those cost-benefit reports, could those be made available?
Yeah, it's actually online on our website.
We would put it on our website too if you send it.
Thank you.
I'm very conscious it is a Friday afternoon and people probably have other places to go and things to do. I will take any final comments or questions and then probably try to Anything else for the good of the order?
I think they're thirsty. This will be on YouTube, by the way. Thank you for Templeton Cable Access.
Thank you very much. This is a great conversation.
Thank you, Secretary.